I never expected to be standing there, heart racing, watching the love of my life walk into a hotel with another man. It wasn't just the sight of them together, it was the realization that everything I had believed about my marriage, about us, was a lie. In that moment, my whole world turned upside down. It all started like any other night. I had no reason to believe anything was wrong. She kissed me goodbye, told me she had a work dinner, and headed out. But for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't her words. It wasn't even her actions. It was just a gut feeling. I brushed it off, but as I sat there in the quiet house, I couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion. I tried to push it down, tried to focus on the things I needed to do, but it wouldn't go away. There was something off about her lately. The late nights, the strange phone calls, the distant look in her eyes whenever I asked her about her day. I had to know, even if it hurt. I don't know what made me decide to follow her that night. It wasn't something I had ever considered doing before. But there I was, slipping out of the house after she left. My heart pounded in my chest as I started the car, my hands gripping the wheel tighter than usual. Something inside me was pushing me forward, telling me to go, to see for myself. I told myself it was probably nothing. She'd probably gone to dinner with colleagues, maybe even some late-night work meeting I didn't know about. But as I followed her, it didn't feel like that. Every turn she made, every street we passed, my anxiety grew. My thoughts spiraled out of control. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was overthinking everything. But then we reached the hotel, a nice one we'd passed by before. It wasn't anything extraordinary, but it was upscale enough that it raised an eyebrow. I watched as she pulled into the parking lot, parked, and got out of the car. She didn't look back, didn't notice me hiding a few cars behind her. But I saw her. I saw everything. There was no mistaking it. She was meeting someone. And the way she walked toward the lobby, the way she looked over her shoulder as if to make sure no one was watching, something felt wrong. It was all too calculated, too familiar. As she entered the hotel, I knew, deep down, what was really happening. This wasn't a business meeting. This wasn't a late-night dinner. She was hiding something from me. And then he appeared, a man. I couldn't see his face clearly from where I was parked. But I could tell he was tall. He was walking beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back. They were laughing. It wasn't just casual conversation. No, it was the kind of laughter that comes from shared moments, from a closeness that I knew wasn't just professional. My stomach twisted, my heart dropped. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. I could see it all in the way they moved, the way they interacted. This wasn't some work colleague. This was something else. Something more. I sat there frozen, my mind racing as I tried to process what I was seeing. I should have driven away, I should have left, but I couldn't. I was trapped, caught between the truth I didn't want to face and the fear of confronting it. I stayed there, paralyzed by the weight of it all, unable to tear my eyes away from the sight. Soon, the truth hit me like a brick. She was cheating on me. I knew it then. There was no other explanation. The man, the hotel, the way they looked at each other, it was all too clear. My mind tried to make sense of it, to justify it, to convince me that I was wrong. But deep down, I knew, she had betrayed me. Everything we had built, everything I thought was real, had just come crashing down. The life I knew, the love I thought we shared, was nothing more than a facade. I didn't confront them, I didn't go inside the hotel, storm into the lobby, and demand answers. No, I couldn't do that yet. I couldn't bear to hear the truth from her lips, not in that moment. So I drove home, the silence in the car deafening. My thoughts were a blur, racing faster than I could process. What now? What was I supposed to do with this knowledge, with this gut-wrenching truth? The drive back home was a blur. I didn't know what I was feeling. Anger, heartbreak, confusion. It was all a tangled mess inside me. I parked the car in the driveway, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I stared at the front door, the house I thought was a symbol of our life together. My life was still on the other side of that door. But everything had changed. The woman I had trusted with everything, the one I had built a future with, was not the woman I thought she was. For a moment, I considered just leaving, driving as far as I could and never looking back. But that would have been the coward's way out. I wasn't going to let this happen in silence. I needed to know everything. I needed her to explain, to face what she had done. I walked through the door, and as I did, I took a deep breath. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I went to the living room, sat on the couch, and waited. I could hear the front door creak open, the sound of keys being set down on the kitchen counter. Her footsteps echoed through the house, slow and deliberate, as though she knew something was wrong. When she walked into the living room, our eyes met for a brief second. Her smile faltered, her eyes flickering with that telltale guilt I had never seen before. I had always known her well, her eyes never lied. She looked at me, almost like she was waiting for me to say something. But I wasn't going to speak first, not this time. "Where were you tonight?" I asked, my voice calm but my heart pounding in my chest. I could see the panic in her eyes. She hesitated for a split second, then answered. Too quickly. "Work," she said, almost too casually, trying to mask the unease in her voice. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at her, trying to gauge the sincerity of her words. And then I asked the question that I knew would shatter everything. The question that I could no longer keep inside. "Then why were you at a hotel with him?" I said, my words cutting through the silence. Her face went pale, she didn't even try to deny it, she couldn't. Her lips parted as if she was searching for the right words, but none came. I could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air between us. She started to speak, but the words were all jumbled, almost incoherent. I didn't. It's not what you think," she stammered. But I couldn't take it anymore. I cut her off, my voice sharp. "It is exactly what I think. I saw you. I watched you walk into that hotel with him. What the hell is going on, Maddie?" She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. But at that moment, it didn't matter. I wasn't going to let her off the hook. I deserved the truth. "I never meant for this to happen," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how else to." "How else to what?" I yelled, standing up, my frustration boiling over. "To cheat on me? To lie to me for months? To sneak around behind my back?" She flinched at the sound of my voice. I saw the guilt in her eyes, but I couldn't feel sorry for her, not yet. She finally collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. "I didn't want to hurt you, Matt, but I was lonely. You don't understand. We've been trying for a baby for so long and it felt like it was never going to happen. I couldn't keep going like this." The room seemed to close in around me. I could feel the ground slipping from beneath my feet. I had always believed that we were a team, that we would face everything together. But now? She was telling me that she had been going behind my back, seeking comfort and solutions from someone else, while I had been in the dark. By this point I had lost trust in even the organization that had supposedly been on my side. I had promised her I would go to any length to protect her. And "You couldn't come to me?" I asked, my voice a mixture of disbelief and hurt. "You couldn't talk to me about it? Instead you go to someone else? A complete stranger? What the hell, Maddie?" She took another shaky breath, her eyes pleading with me. "I tried. I really tried, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to have a baby, Matt. And when it didn't happen, I couldn't take it. I needed something, someone." She broke down in front of me, sobbing uncontrollably. I could see how broken she was, how lost she felt. But none of that changed the reality of what had happened. None of it changed the fact that she had betrayed me in the worst possible way. She had gone outside our marriage to fulfill her own need, to fill the emptiness she felt. And in doing so, she had destroyed the foundation of everything we had built together. I stood there, my heart in pieces, watching the woman I had loved for years crumble before me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should comfort her, scream at her, or walk away and never look back. But I couldn't just walk away, not yet, not without getting the truth, not without understanding what had led her to make such a destructive decision. As I sat back down on the couch, I realized how little I knew about the woman I had married. It wasn't just the cheating that hurt. It was the realization that I had been living a lie. That everything I thought I knew about our relationship had been built on false pretenses. The intimacy we had shared, the promises we had made, the future we had talked about. It was all shattered in an instant. I had no idea what came next. I didn't know if I could forgive her, if I even wanted to. All I knew was that the woman I had thought I knew so well was no longer the same person in front of me. And the silence between us grew unbearable, stretching longer than I ever thought possible. Her sobs filled the room, and I stood there, still in disbelief. The anger I had felt earlier was slowly being replaced by something else. A dull ache, like I was bleeding inside, but I didn't know where the wound was. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the trips we had taken, the late-night talks about our future, the small gestures that had made me believe in the love we had. And now, in an instant, it all seemed like it was nothing more than an illusion. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to regain some semblance of control. "I never wanted this to happen," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think it would. I didn't think I'd get this far." "I need some space," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "I need to think." I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, not bothering to look back. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, but it did little to calm the storm in my mind. My body moved on autopilot, heading toward the only place I could think of. Frank's place. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, not bothering to look back. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, but it did little to calm the storm in my mind. My body moved on autopilot, heading toward the only place I could think of. Frank's place. I needed someone to talk to, someone who knew me, someone who wouldn't judge me for whatever I was feeling. I needed perspective, and Frank was the one person who could give it to me, whether I liked it or not. He had always been blunt, but I needed that right now. I couldn't afford any sugarcoating. When I arrived at his apartment, I let myself in. Frank was on the couch, already with a beer in his hand, clearly expecting me. He didn't ask any questions, just handed me one as I sat down next to him. "So, how bad?" he asked, his voice low, but knowing. I took a deep breath and swigged my beer, not sure where to start. She was at a hotel, with some guy." Frank raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. "What guy?" "I don't know, she never told me. I found out, saw them walking in together." I paused, swallowing hard. She said it wasn't what I thought. But how could it not be? She was with him, Frank. She was cheating. Frank took a long sip of his beer, nodding slowly. "Yeah man, that's rough. But here's the thing. She's not the only one who's screwed up here." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice tinged with confusion. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice tinged with confusion. He set his beer down and turned to face me. "Look, I know you're pissed. I get it. But have you ever really stopped to think about why this happened? Why she felt like she had to go outside the marriage?" I looked at Frank, not sure where he was going with this. "What, you think I'm to blame for her cheating now?" He shook his head. "I'm not saying that at all. But marriage isn't just about love, Matt. It's about both people being there for each other, really being there. And if one person feels neglected, or alone, or like they're not getting what they need, well, that's when things like this happen. It doesn't make it right, but it makes it easier to understand." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that this was her fault, that she had betrayed me, that nothing would ever make this okay. But a part of me knew Frank was right. I hadn't been there for her, not in the way she needed. We had been struggling with our fertility issues for months, but we hadn't really communicated about how we were feeling. I had assumed everything was fine, that we could handle it, but now, here I was, facing the ugly consequences of my ignorance. As I sat there listening to Frank talk, I felt a strange clarity settling in. This wasn't just about her betrayal, it was about both of us failing to address the cracks in our relationship. We had both ignored the signs, buried ourselves in routines, hoping things would just work out on their own. But they hadn't, and now everything had come crashing down. "Do you think we can fix it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Frank didn't answer right away, he just sat there, contemplating. "I don't know man, I really don't. But if you're going to try, you need to start by looking at yourself first. You can't just blame her for everything." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I don't know if I can even look at her the same way again." Frank looked at me, his expression serious. "You don't have to decide that right now. Take some time. But whatever you do, don't just react out of anger. You deserve answers, and you deserve to make the decision that's right for you." I spent the rest of the night at Frank's, trying to clear my head. I didn't sleep. How could I? My mind was racing, my heart torn between wanting to get away from everything, wanting to leave her behind, and the deep desire to understand why this happened. The love I had for her hadn't vanished, but it felt tainted now, like it had been poisoned by lies, by secrets, by this betrayal. I thought about the future, about our plans, about everything we had built. I wasn't sure if I could ever go back to the way things were. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. But I also wasn't sure I could walk away without knowing the full truth. Without knowing why she had done what she had done. The next morning, I knew what I had to do. I needed closure. I needed to hear it from her. To hear her side of the story. To know if she was truly remorseful. I couldn't just sit in this limbo forever. I drove back home, my mind still clouded with questions. I didn't know if I could forgive her. But I needed to know if she was willing to make things right, if she was truly sorry for the pain she had caused. When I walked through the front door again, I found her sitting in the living room, waiting for me. Her eyes were red from crying, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Maddie," I said softly, my voice shaking, "we need to talk." The tension in the air was palpable as I stood in front of her. I had been gone all night, and now, I was back. This time, I was determined to get the truth. I needed answers, not just for my own peace of mind, but for the sake of whatever was left of our marriage. She didn't look at me right away. Instead, she was staring down at her hands, almost as if she was afraid to meet my eyes. I felt a pang of hurt at the sight. How had we ended up here? How had we gone from the couple who shared everything, to this strange, almost foreign distance between us? "Maddie," I said again, softer this time, "we need to talk. I can't do this without knowing what happened." She slowly raised her eyes, her face streaked with tears. But there was something else in her gaze. Guilt. Fear. And beneath it all, something that I couldn't quite place. But I needed to understand, and she probably needed to understand. "I never wanted you to find out like this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to hurt you, Matt. I never thought you'd catch me." I could feel the anger creeping back, but I fought it down. This wasn't about blaming her anymore. This was about trying to understand. I needed to hear the truth, no matter how hard it was. "Why?" I asked simply. "Why did you do it? Why did you go to such lengths to hide this from me?" She hesitated, looking down again. I could see her hands shaking. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt like I had to. I couldn't live with the idea of not having a child. I couldn't keep waiting for things to work out with us." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known there had been tension, but this? This was something I hadn't even considered. You didn't want to have my child?" I asked, disbelief in my voice. She shook her head slowly. "No, that's not it. I wanted a baby. I wanted our baby, Matt. But I couldn't wait anymore. We were trying for so long, and nothing was happening. I needed something more. I needed to be a mother." She took a shaky breath and continued, each word seeming harder than the last. "It wasn't about wanting someone else. It was about having a child. I thought if I could just get pregnant, if I could just start a family, everything else would work out, and maybe I wouldn't have to face the fact that we might never have kids of our own, that you might not be able to, that we might not have a family." I was stunned. "So you found someone else. You cheated on me, not because of anything else, but because you couldn't get pregnant." Her face flushed crimson. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make it work without telling you, without putting any more pressure on you. But then, I just kept going, and I kept telling myself it was the only way." For a moment, I couldn't even process her words. The idea of her going to someone else, of her seeking out another man to solve our problems, it didn't make sense. And yet, the pain of hearing it was worse than I had imagined. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about the erosion of trust. The idea that she had decided my love for her wasn't enough. But then, as I looked at her, something changed in me. The anger wasn't there anymore. It had transformed into something deeper, something I didn't know how to deal with. I felt broken. "I can't believe you did this," I said, my voice shaking. "I trusted you. I believed in us. How could you betray me like this?" She started to speak, but I held up my hand to stop her. I needed to collect myself. I needed to find my words. "You don't even know how much this hurts. You don't even understand what it's like to feel like everything you believed in is a lie." She looked at me. She nodded silently, the weight of my words sinking in. But I couldn't just leave it there. I had to ask one more thing, one thing that was gnawing at me. Who was he? I asked, my voice tight. Who was the man you were with at the hotel? I need to know. Her gaze flickered, and for a second I thought she might break down again. But then she met my eyes, and I saw the raw truth in her expression. It doesn't matter, she said quietly. It wasn't about him, it was about me, Matt. It was about what I needed. And I didn't think you'd understand. I didn't think you'd... Forgive me. I thought I could make it work without you knowing. You didn't want to have my child? I asked, disbelief in my voice. She shook her head slowly. No, that's not it. I wanted a baby. I wanted our baby, Matt. But I couldn't wait anymore. We were trying for so long, and nothing was happening. I needed something more. I needed to be a mother. She took a shaky breath and continued, each word seeming harder than the last. It wasn't about wanting someone else. It was about having a child. I thought if I could just get pregnant, if I could just start a family, everything else would work out, and maybe I wouldn't have to face the fact that we might never have kids of our own, that you might not be able to, that we might not have a family. I was stunned. So you found someone else. You cheated on me, not because of anything else, but because you couldn't get pregnant. Her face flushed crimson. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make it work without telling you, without putting any more pressure on you. But then, I just kept going, and I kept telling myself it was the only way. For a moment, I couldn't even process her words. The idea of her going to someone else, of her seeking out another man to solve our problems, it didn't make sense. And yet, the pain of hearing it was worse than I had imagined. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about the erosion of trust. The idea that she had decided my love for her wasn't enough. But then, as I looked at her, something changed in me. The anger wasn't there anymore. It had transformed into something deeper, something I didn't know how to deal with. I felt broken. I can't believe you did this, I said, my voice shaking. I trusted you. I believed in us. How could you betray me like this? She started to speak, but I held up my hand to stop her. I needed to collect myself. I needed to find my words. You don't even know how much this hurts. You don't even understand what it's like to feel like everything you believed in is a lie. She looked at me. She nodded silently, the weight of my words sinking in. But I couldn't just leave it there. I had to ask one more thing, one thing that was gnawing at me. Who was he? I asked, my voice tight. Who was the man you were with at the hotel? I need to know. Her gaze flickered, and for a second, I thought she might break down again. But then she met my eyes, and I saw the raw truth in her expression. It doesn't matter, she said quietly. It wasn't about him, it was about me, Matt. It was about what I needed. And I didn't think you'd understand. I didn't think you'd... Forgive me. I thought I could make it work without you knowing. The pain didn't go away, but it became easier to navigate. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole again. But the fog that had clouded my mind started to clear. I realized I had spent so much time dwelling on the past, on the hurt and the betrayal, that I had forgotten about what I needed. I had forgotten about myself. And so, I began to ask myself some tough questions. What did I want? What did I need to move forward? Could I rebuild not just my marriage but my life as a whole? The pain didn't go away, but it became easier to navigate. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole again. But the fog that had clouded my mind started to clear. I realized I had spent so much time dwelling on the past, on the hurt and the betrayal, that I had forgotten about what I needed. I had forgotten about myself. And so, I began to ask myself some tough questions. What did I want? What did I need to move forward? Could I rebuild not just my marriage but my life as a whole? I had already started therapy. I had started unpacking my emotions, little by little. And while it was a difficult process, it was also liberating. For the first time in months, I was starting to see a path forward. It wasn't the path I had imagined, but it was a path all the same. A week later, I returned home. I wasn't ready to confront Maddie yet, but I knew I couldn't avoid the inevitable. We had to talk. I sat down with my lawyer Kelly, and we began to work out the details. I wanted to be fair to Maddie, but I also knew that I had to protect myself. This wasn't just about division of assets or spousal support. This was about my future, my mental health, and my sense of peace. When I finally sat down with Maddie, We were both nervous. But the conversation was different this time. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't about recriminations. It was about what we could do next. "Maddie," I began, my voice steady though I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "I can't be in this relationship anymore. I've spent too long trying to figure out what went wrong, but I've come to realize that it's not something we can fix. We've changed, and not for the better." Her face crumpled, tears welling up in her eyes. But she didn't interrupt. She listened, and in that moment, I saw that she knew, deep down, what was coming. "I can't forgive you for what you did," I continued. "And I don't think I'll ever be able to. But I don't want to keep living in this purgatory, where we're both pretending everything is fine. I've made my decision." Maddie didn't try to stop me. She didn't fight it. Instead she just nodded, her face pale. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was done. The papers were signed, the divorce was final, and in a way, I felt a sense of relief. It was over. I could finally move on. I could focus on myself and my future. Free from the weight of betrayal and hurt. The months that followed were a blur. I moved into my condo, a fresh start in a new place. I continued therapy, learning how to heal, learning how to let go of the anger. I focused on rebuilding my life, on taking care of myself first and foremost. And while the scars of my past remained, I started to realize something. I wasn't broken. I had been hurt, deeply, but I wasn't irreparably damaged. I had the strength to rebuild, to move forward and to live my life on my terms. A year had passed since that day. The day I walked out of our house, the day everything changed. And now, as I stood in front of a new chapter in my life, I could honestly say that I was in a better place. The pain had faded, and while it wasn't something I would ever forget, it no longer controlled me. I had learned to live again, to love again, this time not out of fear or obligation, but because I deserved it. And while I hadn't found a new relationship yet, I knew one thing for sure. I had finally found peace. A new chapter of my life had begun. And though the scars from the past were still there, they no longer had the power to control me. It wasn't an easy transition. Nothing in this journey had been. But each day felt like I was taking another step forward, away from the hurt, away from the memories that used to haunt me, and toward a future I could start to shape on my own terms. From that day forward, there was hope for the future. It was here when I made the transition from placing my hopes on my own terms. The months after the divorce were full of challenges, yes. But they were also filled with unexpected moments of peace and growth. Living on my own for the first time in years wasn't as freeing as I had expected. There were nights when the silence was unbearable. When I found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, the echoes of what had been still ringing in my ears. When I returned to my original space, my body reacted to the silence that had fallen between earlier sessions. But I refused to let those moments break me. The loneliness, the pain, they were part of the process. And as much as it sucked to face them, I knew I had to. I couldn't heal by avoiding it. I couldn't move forward by pretending everything was fine. I needed to embrace the discomfort and allow myself to feel what I had been running from, so that it wasn't easy to break old habits. I caught myself reaching for my phone to text Maddie, to share a random thought or a fleeting moment of my day, but then I'd remember, and it would hurt. But I got better at moving through those moments. Slowly, but surely, I found a rhythm in my new life. I found solace in the small things. Going to the gym, reading, cooking dinner for myself, or even just watching movies without the weight of expectation hanging over me. I learned that being alone didn't have to mean being lonely. Therapy became a cornerstone of my recovery. I'd always been skeptical about it, thinking it was just for people who couldn't figure things out on their own. But I quickly realized that I had no idea how to fix myself. I didn't even know where to begin. It was in therapy that I was able to start untangling the mess of emotions that had piled up over the years. I discovered how deeply the betrayal had impacted my sense of self-worth, my trust in others, and my ability to believe that love could be unconditional. But I also began to realize that the problems in my marriage were not entirely one-sided. Yes, Maddie's actions had hurt me. But I wasn't without fault either. There were things I could have done differently, ways in which I had checked out of the relationship long before the affair happened. Therapy helped me confront those uncomfortable truths. It was a humbling experience, but an important one. As time went on, I began to rebuild my social circle. Frank remained a constant in my life, offering a safe space to vent, to laugh, and to share the small victories along the way. But I also made an effort to reconnect with old friends, to nurture relationships that had been neglected during the chaos of my marriage. I even started dating again, though cautiously. At first, I was hesitant, scared of getting hurt again, of repeating the same mistakes. But dating, this time, wasn't about filling a void. It was about discovering who I was as an individual, outside of the context of being someone's partner. I didn't need a relationship to complete me. I was learning to be content with myself, and that was the most powerful realization of all. Looking back, it's strange to think that my greatest lesson came from something so painful. The divorce, the heartbreak, the betrayal, they had all been catalysts for my own self-discovery. In the most painful moments, I had been forced to face my fears and insecurities. But I had emerged stronger, more self-aware, and with a deeper sense of what I needed and deserved in life. I began to travel more, something I had always wanted to do, but had put off for years. I took weekend trips to places I had only dreamed of visiting, immersing myself in new cultures, meeting new people, and learning to enjoy life without the constant worry of someone else's needs and expectations. It was in these moments that I truly understood the importance of independence, not just emotionally but also physically. I no longer defined myself by my relationship status, or by how others viewed me. I was living for me, and that was a beautiful thing. One afternoon, about 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Maddie at a coffee shop. It was a strange feeling, seeing her again after all this time. She had changed. Or at least, I had changed, enough that she seemed different to me. She hesitated when she saw me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. She looked like she wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. I knew that look. It was the same one I had seen in her eyes countless times before, when she didn't know what to do, when she was uncertain about the future. "Maddie," I said, my voice calm, collected, It's good to see you. How have you been?" She smiled faintly, but there was a sadness behind her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I've been okay," she replied. "I've been trying to figure things out. I don't know if I ever will, but I'm trying." I nodded. I understood. She wasn't the person I had once known, but I wasn't the same person either. We had both changed, and while the past would always be part of us, it no longer defined who we were. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice tinged with regret. "For everything. For what I did. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I just wanted you to know that I regret it every day." "I know," I said softly. "But we can't undo what's been done, Maddie. We can only move forward." There was a long silence between us, and then she nodded, understanding. "I wish you nothing but happiness, Matt. You deserve it." I watched her walk away, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anger. Or sadness. I felt peace. The past was behind me, and I was finally free. As time passed, the weight of the past grew lighter. Every day, I found myself gaining more clarity, more strength. The world didn't feel as heavy anymore, and the future, once so daunting and filled with uncertainty, began to seem full of possibilities. For the first time in a long time, I realized that the life I had envisioned, one of peace, contentment, and a sense of belonging, was still within my reach. I had spent so many years thinking my happiness depended on someone else, on the perfect relationship, on being loved by someone who couldn't even love themselves. But now I knew better. My happiness was my own responsibility, and once I accepted that, everything else started to fall into place. As I moved through the final stages of my recovery, I made a conscious decision to forgive. Not for Maddie's sake, not for anyone else's, but for me. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened or pretending it hadn't hurt. It wasn't about minimizing the betrayal. It was about releasing the hold that anger, resentment, and bitterness had on me. It was about taking back control over my life. In therapy, I had come to understand that holding on to anger only kept me stuck in the past. That bitterness prevented me from healing. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the anger I held toward Maddie wasn't helping me. It was keeping me tethered to the very thing I was trying to escape. So, I forgave her, not because I had to, but because I wanted to free myself. It didn't mean I would ever forget what happened, but I no longer let it define me. I had grown, and I knew my worth now. One of the most important things I learned after the divorce was the value of the relationships that had remained in my life, even when I wasn't at my best. Frank had been my rock, and my other friends, though few, had stood by me without question. But I had neglected many of these relationships over the years. Caught up in the chaos of my marriage, lost in the web of my own insecurities. Now with a clearer mind and heart, I made the effort to reconnect. One evening, Frank invited me to a small gathering at his place. It had been a while since I'd seen most of the people there, and I wasn't sure what to expect. But as soon as I walked in, I was welcomed with open arms, the room filled with laughter, and I realized something important. These were the people who mattered. These were the people who had seen me through everything, and they were the ones who truly understood me. I had always put off so many things, thinking I would have time later, but now, in my newfound freedom, I was determined to rediscover the joys of life I had once neglected. The things that made me feel alive, things like traveling, art, music, and even just spending time in nature, became a regular part of my routine. I took a trip to the mountains one weekend, something I had always wanted to do. It was simple. Just me, a backpack, and a few days to get lost in the beauty of the world. I found peace in the stillness, in the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, and in the solitude of the hike. It reminded me that the world was bigger than my pain, and that there was so much more to experience. And then, there was Emily. I wasn't looking for a relationship. I wasn't sure I was ready for one. But Emily came into my life unexpectedly. She was kind, grounded, and incredibly patient. She didn't push me to be anyone other than myself. She understood that I had a history, that I was still healing, but she didn't let that stop her from showing me that it was okay to love again. At first, I resisted. I was scared. I didn't want to make the same mistakes again. But Emily gave me the space to be vulnerable. She didn't expect perfection, just honesty and patience. And little by little, I started to open up. I shared my fears, my hopes, and the broken parts of me that had once felt irreparable. It wasn't instant and it wasn't without challenges. But Emily helped me realize that love wasn't about finding someone to fix me. It was about finding someone who would support me as I healed, as I grew, and as I became the person I was always meant to be. Months passed and I received a letter. It was from Maddie. Reading it, I realized that the woman I had once loved, the woman I had built my life with, was still struggling. Her words were filled with regret, with longing for what we had, and with an undeniable truth. She had been broken too. But she had chosen a different path. A path of self-discovery that I had hoped she would take, long before the betrayal. The letter was heartfelt, and I appreciated it. It wasn't an apology I needed anymore. Nor was it an attempt to reconcile. It was a recognition of the pain we had both caused each other, and an acknowledgement that we had both learned from it. We weren't the same people who had stood at the altar all those years ago. And that was okay. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I had moved on. I had forgiven, but I had also learned. I had learned to let go, to take back control, and to embrace the future with open arms. As I sit here, looking back at everything I've been through, I can honestly say that I'm proud of the man I've become. I've rebuilt my life from the ashes of a broken marriage, and I've learned that happiness isn't something you find, it's something you create. The past will always be a part of me, but it no longer has a hold on me. I'm moving forward, facing whatever comes next with strength, confidence, and the knowledge that I am worthy of love, peace, and happiness. The future is mine, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see what it holds. If you found this story captivating and relatable, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more stories of personal growth, resilience, and overcoming life's toughest challenges. Have you ever been in a situation where trust was broken? How did you handle it? Drop your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, no matter how tough things get, there's always hope for a new beginning. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, stay strong and keep moving forward.